AM 570 KLAC, 98.7 KYSR, HD2.
Los Angeles.
Available anywhere using the iHeartRadio app.
AM 570.
An LA sports icon.
Fred Rogan is here tonight.
Decades on your television covering Los Angeles sports.
Fred Rogan, huge in Los Angeles.
The Dean.
I'm the Dean.
Fred Rogan.
Weekdays before Petros and
A
Money.
USC All-American.
USC's Rodney Peete.
An NFL quarterback.
Absolutely perfectly delivered by
Rodney Peete.
Available on the iHeartRadio app or on AM570LAsports.com.
This is Rogan and Rodney.
Let's go. Fred Rogan, Rodney Peete, AM 570 LA Sports. 2 hours for us today. Well, I don't think anybody believed it would come down to a weekend like this. Both the teams on top of the NL West, best records in baseball, Dodgers and Giants. Rodney, I can't remember, and in the teams we mentioned it, I think it was 97, a time where these games meant as much to both teams as they do right now.
No doubt. And I think, and we touched on it earlier, that this series, the Dodgers have been playing with a lot of momentum. Obviously, just swept the Braves going into this series. Playing with a lot of confidence, got guys back healthy. I feel like the Dodgers can survive if they don't happen to win this series, but I think the Giants in this situation, I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but I got the feeling because I felt the Dodgers would be in this position come September, that they'd be either in first place, that they would catch them. But if the Giants lose this series, I don't know if they recover from this and catch the Dodgers again.
So I was on San Francisco radio last night.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the series. They called me. And I did use a few things you said, and I gave you credit for it. One of them was, if the Dodgers win the series or take 2 of 3 of the series, they're not looking back.
Yeah.
You can just kiss that off. I also said...
What did they say to that? Were they shocked you said something like that?
No, they weren't shocked about that. They were shocked about this. When I was talking about the injuries the Dodgers have overcome this year and how they're in the position they're in and why they are playing like they are and how remarkable it is that Dave Roberts has them in the position they're in because of the number of injuries. But this is how they've played all year, and this is where they're at. Then it turned into, we've had injuries too. We have injuries right now. And I said, oh, so we have excuses now? They haven't even started the series yet. Yeah. I'm telling you what the Dodgers have overcome to get there throughout the season. You're telling me you have problems now. Okay, well, those problems have been the entire year for the Dodgers. Well, Johnny Cueto and Alex Wood and Solano or whatever his name is. And I was like,
yeah, we can point to Dustin May and Clayton Kershaw. I mean, those guys are still out. Tony Gonsolin. I mean, those guys are still out. So, yeah, we got injuries now, too. But we've had them all season long, but we got them now, too, so we can match you toe for toe with the injuries if you want to go that route.
That's exactly, so they started that bit. They started that routine with me. Then I gave Farhan props. I said he's done a magnificent job. He's building it just like the Dodgers were constructed, so year in and year out, they will be in a position to succeed. And they said, well, the Dodgers have more depth. I said, well, yeah, they've been at it longer. Andrew Friedman has been at this longer than Farhan has in San Francisco. Well, they said, well, do you think that's fair? I went, well, hell yes, it's fair.
What do you mean? They said, do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, everything turned into an excuse as to why they may not win. Well, the Dodgers have more depth. Yeah, they do. Got to be honest with you. You'll get there. Farhan will figure that out. You're not there yet. It takes years to get there. Yeah, the Dodgers do have more depth. Well, they have this and that. Well, that's true, too. You're absolutely right about all that. What does that have to do with anything? This is where everybody is at this time right now. I can tell you, after that last night on the radio they're a bit worried. They are a bit concerned now.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. The last thing they wanted to be is in this position. I'll tell you what, they either wanted to be 5 games up or 2 games behind. You know what I mean? So if they lose up there...
They didn't want to be tied.
No.
Is what you're saying.
This is the one place they didn't want to be, and the one place it's good the Dodgers are. And it comes with this rivalry. If you think about L.A. rivalries, L.A. sports rivalries, okay, obviously you're a huge part of one of them. USC Notre Dame, USC UCLA. Those would be huge LA rivalries. Fair?
Yep.
Okay. Lakers Celtics. That's a rivalry as well.
Yep.
And maybe you can enlighten me. I don't know of a bigger rivalry in LA sports than Dodgers Giants. I think that's number one.
In what?
All LA sports, as rivalries go. I think it's the most intense. I think it is the most deep-rooted. I think it's the most intense number one rivalry, Dodgers Giants.
I don't know. That's a great call question for our listeners at some point, but it is intense. Don't get me wrong. It's very intense. Lakers Celtics is really, 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 really intense. But I'm gonna go with USC UCLA. I just got to go with that one. It's the most intense because it's directly in LA and it involves people that you see at school and go to the market and interact with and work with and all those things. That's why I think that one is a unique one in all of sports when it's two teams within the city, major universities like that. So I'm gonna go with that. But those three, I think if you ask and poll it, any one of those three could come up as the number one.
Kevin, what do you think?
Well, the Dodgers Giants is interesting because they both moved out here at the same time. That's I don't know of any other in major American sports where that's ever happened before, where two rivals actually moved to keep the rivalry together from one coast all the way to the other. What hurts it is that they have not, like you mentioned, Fred, had a lot of meaningful games since the two have been out here. There have been times where the Giants have been good, obviously winning World Series. The Dodgers have been good, winning World Series. They just have not had. How many important, impactful Red Sox-Yankee games have we had over the last 20 years?
Right.
We haven't had
They're always in the ALCS and playing each other in playoffs, and we don't see that with the Giants and Dodgers.
We haven't had an impactful series with the Giants and Dodgers in 50 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But even with that, we call them the hated ones. People can't stand the Giants. We were keeping an eye on the Giants-Brewers game yesterday, Rodney, and the Giant fans who were polled couldn't give the Dodgers credit for anything with their pitching staff, as far as them having the best pitching staff in baseball or whatever the question was. So there is something that's deep-seated there. I think UCLA-USC is pretty close for the reasons that Rodney gave as well. But I think considering USC and UCLA have had meaningful games, even as recently as a decade ago, UCLA knocking SC out of a potential BCS championship game. But it's still deep-seated and deep-rooted with the Giants and the Dodgers. So I think it speaks to that rivalry that they have had so few meaningful games, yet that hatred is still there between the two.
Yeah, and remember with UCLA and USC, with all due respect, speaking to my colleague, my partner, and my friend who graduated from USC, if you didn't go to UCLA or USC, do you really care? Do you really care?
It's a fair question.
If they're good, if they're both good,
you're interested.
Yes.
You're interested. If you didn't go to those schools and they're both good, you're interested. But the Dodgers, Rodney, but if the Dodgers
are horrible, if the Dodgers are horrible and the Giants are horrible, I mean,
yeah,
right. But they're both fighting for it. The reason why it's so interesting now, everybody's excited about it, because both of these teams are going to the playoffs, and either one of them can win the World Series, and they possibly could face each other in the playoffs. If USC and UCLA are good, and they're fighting for the Rose Bowl, or they're fighting to get into a playoff berth, yeah, it's intense in LA. I've been in it. I've been in it with Troy Aikman for 2 years and knew how the city reacted to when both teams were good and playing for something.
What was that like?
And that matchup, whoever won that game would go to the road. It was intense in this town.
What did you experience?
And it didn't matter if you went to the school or not. People picked sides.
All right, well, what did you experience as a guy that was in it?
You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't go anywhere, and everything from Monday through Saturday was all about the game. Every headline. Front page of the Times, not sports page, front page of the Times was a story on the game. So it was intense, especially the year, my senior year when I had measles. It was national news, the game, and so it was more. It was crazy. People were at a transfer hospital twice because people were finding out where I was. And it was, I would turn on the news, different parts of different, watching you and everybody else, and then they'd show news clips of different people, and they had students that would have dots on their face for measles about the game. So it was intense. So and that's with pretty much everything. If the teams are good and something's on the line, people get more interested.
Okay, so now Lakers Celtics, that rivalry. That is pretty deep seated. There's no question about it. But they don't play each other enough. That's the problem. They see each other twice during the regular season. Then, if you get to the playoffs, they don't play each other enough. Dodgers Giants, I mean, they play all the time. So there's a chance to have that sense of bitterness or hatred more often than if the Lakers and Celtics play. More often than if UCLA and USC plays because they play once.
Yeah. No, I get it. I think that's what I say. I think you get three different answers if we polled people and had them call in and say which one is the most heated rivalry or the biggest rivalry. And for LA people, I think there'll be a third of the people say the Giants Dodgers, and a third of the people say USC UCLA, and a third of people say Lakers Celtics.
I guess the Dodgers are getting them at just the right time too, beginning tonight. Exactly, precisely the right time. Might feel differently at 9:40 tonight when the game is over, but as we sit here going into the first game.
Well, here's the thing, Fred. What does it say about, we talked about this with David Vassay and about why Scherzer wasn't pitching in this series and why they elected to go with him Wednesday night and close out the Braves and get ready for the following week. The Giants elected to go with their guy to make sure they got a win against Milwaukee and didn't get a 4-game sweep. And Rogers went out and pitched a great game for them, and they won, but he won't be available in the series against the Dodgers. So them saving or pitching him and not saving him for tonight, what do you think that says about them and where their mindset is? Their mindset is don't fall. They needed a win again. They needed to get a win before they played the Dodgers.
Oh yeah, don't fall farther behind.
Right.
Don't fall farther behind. No, get a win and get even here. Yeah, that's what it said. They understand the importance of, I'm telling you, the way it lays out now, this is not the Dodgers season. No matter what happens, no matter how this plays out in San Francisco, they're going to be fine. I think they'll take at least 2 of 3. That's me personally. This might be the Giants season right here. If they get beat a couple of times, that's not good. If they get swept, all of a sudden, everything they had built the entire year, getting to that point, they're now going the wrong way. And this is precisely the wrong time to go the wrong way.
No, it is. This is where you want to play well. This is the most important part of the season, especially if you've been playing well all season. This is the last thing you want is to start to hit a slump right now. But again, their challenges schedule-wise is a little bit tougher than the Dodgers. They got, the Padres several times, and they got to go back to it, or they got Atlanta coming to town again. So it's going to be interesting. They get behind against the Dodgers, it could be tough. Although the Dodgers, they play this series, got to go right to St. Louis, who's no slouch either. So it could be difficult for the Dodgers too. I still think the Dodgers will win it. But it'll be interesting to see where San Francisco goes after this series, because they can very well not say they fall off a cliff like San Diego did, but they could kind of go back into regain the slump that they were already in.
Yeah, for them, right after they face the Dodgers, they will take on Colorado and Chicago. So those are a couple of get-right series before they face San Diego, still fighting for a playoff spot. You talked about Atlanta, and then San Diego again. So I guess for both the Dodgers and Giants, they both play Arizona twice. They both play Colorado. The Giants have Colorado a couple of times. So I will say that, and the Dodgers do have St. Louis, like you mentioned, Rodney. They have San Diego twice. They also have Cincinnati coming up, and they're fighting for a playoff spot too. So I don't know exactly how it stacks up as to who has the tougher schedule, but I wouldn't say it's even. I'd say the Dodgers probably slightly tougher than the Giants, but not that far apart.
So tonight the goal is an opener and then David Price.
Yeah.
And we don't know how far the opener goes.
The game probably dictates that.
Right. And we don't know who that is yet. I mean,
if he strikes out the side in the first inning, he may go too, right?
Why not? Just let him go until he can't.
At least one time through the lineup.
Oh, if they did that, if that really happened, if whoever opened one time through the lineup, David Price could close the game.
Right.
Think about that. He'd go the rest of the way.
Yeah.
If the starter goes 3 innings, the opener goes 3 innings.
Yeah.
Price could go the rest of the way. Okay, well, now we have our plan. That's what should happen tonight.
Yeah, but obviously, you know, I'd be shocked if they don't start a right-hander, right? So, do we know who's starting, Kevin? We don't know that yet, right?
Is it Mitch Blood White?
For San Francisco?
No, for us.
Well, Price is listed as the starter, but again, is he the starter or is he the opener? So that right. Much I can't, but Vassay told us yesterday.
Because they play the matchup game, right? So I'm sure they're probably going to start a righty and bring Price in the second inning or whenever it is to kind of mess with their matchup game.
Yeah, and Desclafani is starting for the Giants. Yeah. Some of the Dodgers have handled, and it starts the season so far for them.
Yeah, and he's been struggling of late too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that game will be on the radio station tonight. When we come back, a man that knows the psyche of 2 cities. Ned Colletti, who did it for the Giants. Ned Colletti, who did it for the Dodgers. One man, a tale of 2 cities. That's next.
Oh, yeah. You got to let this flow a little bit, Fred, because we know what this means when this song comes on.
I know.
Yet? Oh, yeah.
I love this.
Nothing like a Saturday in the park, Freddie. Rodney Pete, Fred Rogan on a Friday. A beautiful Friday that is. We got action.
Oh, we got action.
We got action this weekend. We
Huge
got college
series.
football. But more importantly, we got the Dodgers Giants, Freddie.
We do indeed. Let's bring in the man. One man and a tale of 2 cities. It's our good friend Ned Colletti. Ned, how are you today?
Oh, excellent. Great opening, gentlemen. Great opening.
All right, Ned, you better than anybody know. That's how I set you up. One man, a tale of 2 cities. You know both the markets. You know both the fan bases. You know both the organizations. Just talk about the impact of this game, the rivalry, and how the cities view it.
Well, I think it's one of the great rivalries in all of sport. Started on one coast, is on another coast, so very few rivalries do that. Tied together in a lot of ways. And I think it's going to be a great weekend series. I think it's cool that these 2 teams have battled all the way from the 1st of April to the 3rd of September, whatever today is. I think it's great. And it's, hopefully San Francisco will have some fans in the stands. They've been a little bit down in attendance. Yeah. A lot of seats for Dodger fans up north.
Yeah. Talk about that, though, Ned. The fans in San Francisco, obviously they're intense, love their team like most cities do when their teams are good and even when they're bad. But the difference between Giant fans and Dodger fans as you experienced it?
That's a great question. I think the rivalry means just as much to either fan base, although I never hear any L.A. fans chanting "Beat SF," It's got that kind of L.A. stigma as it had with the Lakers for years, the beat L.A. chants. You don't hear that at Dodger Stadium, beat SF, So probably a little bit more to prove in the northern part of the rivalry. May take it maybe a degree more seriously. Don't know about that because Dodger fans are certainly passionate. But I think it's been I've been so blessed to work in both markets and to see them both. And I can tell you, when I was at Candlestick, I was there half the time, and then at the new park half the time through the years I was up there. And we would draw nothing at Candlestick, and then we draw 60,000 for the Dodgers. I may have told you this story before. And I asked the guy to run stadium ops. I said, "So what's the deal here? I know it's a big rivalry, but how can we draw 5,000 on Thursday and 60,000 on Saturday?" He said, "Well, people here don't like baseball. They hate baseball. They just hate the Dodgers more than they hate baseball." So that kind of explains it a little bit. But I'm looking forward to a good series. I think the Dodgers are in a really, really good spot and have been for a while. Just taking it step by step.
You know, Ned, let me follow up on that because, the stadium ops guys saying they hate baseball. Is San Francisco a good baseball market?
Well, it is now. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a good market back in the Candlestick days. I mean, you would have 10,000 people, 12,000 people. And in that stadium, I'm sure you guys have been in there. I mean, it was massive. So it looked like, we used to count people coming down, and they had that concourse at the very top of the lower bowl. No other real pathway to go around the ballpark except at the very top. And you could count people coming in. You go, there's 6 right there coming down. You've never done that at the new ballpark they've got or at Dodger Stadium. It was really a huge 49er town. I'm not sure where it's at now since they moved a little bit south. But it was not necessarily a great baseball town. You'd rarely see a Giant hat downtown. And I worked for a different team. I worked for the Cubs for a long time before I went there. And even as a visitor, you realize that the weather's brutal, but it's not like the home crowd is going to give you a hard time either. But that changed. In 2000, when the new ballpark came online, that changed a lot. And I think it's a very, very good baseball city now. I think they've really come a long way. I think they're into it, and I think they obviously their hatred for the Dodgers has not waned one bit. And they took great pride in winning 3 World Series. Although I think they got their hands full trying to do that again before the Dodgers do.
Yeah, Ned, we talked about coming out of this series, and I believe that the Dodgers have, they could, I think they're going to win the series, but if they don't, I think they still recover and keep the momentum that they already have, whereas the Giants have kind of, been in a little bit of a slump, and if they don't win the series, I think it's more detrimental for the Giants to lose this series than it is for the Dodgers. What do you think?
100% agree. 100% agree. This is a vital series for San Francisco to stay in it. Dodgers could, in essence, lose 2 out of 3 or whatever, but I think the Dodgers are built for the long haul. I think San Francisco, there's no debating how great they played. They have played as perfectly as any team could possibly play through this first 5 months plus of a season. But you can start to see the wear and tear coming. I mean, they've got 2 bullpen games in this series. You think they set their we talk about setting rotations up for series. You think they set this up a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hey, let's go with DeSclafani on Friday, and we'll just wing it Saturday and Sunday." I don't think that was the plan, but that's kind of where they're at right now. And they played hard. They played great, but I just don't see them with the depth in their rotation. I don't see them with the depth in the bullpen. I don't really see the depth in the lineup that the Dodgers have. And the Dodgers are starting to play good against decent teams, the ones they just beat. They just beat, obviously they play in Atlanta, and, good team, and, took it to them pretty decisively in a lot of different ways. And they know how to win. I don't think we can ever forget the experience of winning and knowing what September and October baseball feels like, knowing what the day feels like, the expectation. It gets a little bit hotter, a little more bright light and stuff like that. This team is made for it. Giants are still trying to figure out if they are or they're not.
Yeah, and you pointed that out all year long, depth. And you said there will be a point in time where you're going to see those cracks start. Now, that doesn't mean in years to come Farhan won't do a good job, Ned, of constructing a roster with more depth. But maybe it's just a little too soon for that now.
Agreed. I think Farhan's going to do a great job. I think he's probably executive of the year right now. He's done a tremendous job along with Gabe Kapler. But the season is meant for 6 months and then a postseason. It's not meant for 5 or 5 in a week, whatever. And they've been a surprise since the beginning of the season. Nobody expected this. And when that happens in a sport like baseball, it is tough to maintain that. I don't have any doubt he'll be successful, and the franchise will be back to being as good as they've been during the Brian Sabian 2 decades. But I don't think that's right here, right now. And I think they still have some work to do. And I think that the season is starting to show. You can't fool the season. There's just too many facets to playing the game in the relentless pace of a season that you can never fool it. You can never really cheat it or get away with something because the season will find you at some point in time. And I think it's starting to find them right now.
We're going to create an app, and it's going to be called Nedisms. We're just gonna put it in there, and we're gonna send it to people on a daily basis. You can't cheat a season.
It'll find
You can't fool it. You can't fool the
Can't
season.
fool a
You can't.
season. Yeah.
Nope.
Can't fool
Too
it.
long.
Can't fool it. It's not a baseball week. It's not a baseball month. It's a baseball season.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, we're going to create that. Hey, Ned, how do you handle a situation like Max Scherzer, who comes out of the game with hamstring tightness, said he felt it early, comes after the game and says, I've dealt with this before. It felt bad, and I came out, but I won't miss my next start. Now, I know from being an athlete, you're always going to downplay an injury, especially if you think you can play.
Yep.
Is it something that the Dodgers, at this point in the season, should be really cautious about and maybe not start him on Monday or his next start, or make sure that thing is totally ready to go?
I think you got to make sure it's totally ready. I don't think you can fool with it. He has been so good, and we talked this, I think, in the last time I was on with you guys. I think you asked me what my concern would be at this stage, and I'd say you can't afford to lose Julio or Walker or Max Scherzer right now. You got to keep them really at the pace that they're on, the edge that they bring, and the success that they've had. You got to keep that consistent. So I think you got to be wise with it. I think maybe you see how this series goes, and you make a determination when you get to St. Louis. This team is always prepared for a lot of different options and going in many different directions at a given day. So I think it's the old saying of being day-to-day, but I do think that it's something that they're probably looking at on a day-to-day basis. They come out of San Francisco feeling pretty good. They look at the St. Louis matchups that they'll face there as that becomes clearer, and maybe they make an adjustment, or maybe he's feeling great. But anytime you could, especially with those three guys, anytime you can save an inning here too, you got to do it. Because this organization plans for 7 months, not 6, and so you've got to. If you can steal an inning here or there and get a guy off his feet and keep him from throwing an extra 15 or 20 pitches, and you do that 5 or 6 times in the month of September, that's another game. You've just saved yourself another game with that particular pitcher. So I think it was a wise move, and I think we'll see it. We'll see what happens, and if he does pitch, you'll know that he's as good as he could possibly be, because I don't see him going out there either, as competitive as he is, and taking any chances.
You bring up Scherzer, and the other night when he came out of the game and the fans were irate, nobody knew what had happened. They thought, oh, my God, why would Dave Roberts take him out? Ned, I said this earlier in the week. I think everything that's happened to the Dodgers this year, the injuries, the problems, and I said earlier in the week, it's like, oh, good, you got Luke Raley in the lineup. Thank God. Who are these guys? I think Dave Roberts has done his best job managing the ball club this season. And I also think when people are on him and go, what's he doing? He's a different guy than he was when he took the job. I mean, he has learned along the way. He has grown as a manager as well. Would you agree with me? This has been his best job managing?
Yes, I think was good his first year, and I think he continues to get better. And I know there's always criticism coming to no matter who sits in that seat. That's just the nature of the business. But I think managing today is not like managing 20 years ago. You've got so much to manage. You've got a very talented team. And so some people say, well, that's a push-button gig. You just plug guys in and they play. That's not really how it goes, though. And you've got a lot of different things to manage. When people thought of a baseball manager 20 years ago, they really thought about, okay, how does he manage a game? First inning to last inning. Now, when you're thinking about a manager, it's so much, I think, in my opinion, more people driven than ever. How do you manage athletes? How do you manage athletes that are making $35 million a year? How do you manage athletes that are arbitration eligible, looking to build numbers, looking to have a better arbitration settlements or case, and young players trying to get established and have their salaries moved up and play? Whenever you go to an arbitration hearing, or you're even in a free agent thing, teams always look at how much somebody played. Is this an everyday player? Is this somebody who was platooned? Is this somebody who can hit lefties, hit righties? All these different things come into play in the off season. So he's got to manage that in season, because people are going to come to him and say, I'm pretty hot. I mean, we've seen this a handful of times. Guys are red hot, and then, as Nomar will say, El Bencho the next day. Those are tough conversations to have. But I've seen no player in all the years he's been here, I've seen no player, quote, quit. I've seen no player not play as hard as possible. Maybe Manny Machado a touch here and there. But other than that, when you look at the presentation of the club, and it's not always clean, it's a long season, but when you look at how they play for themselves, for the fans, for the city, the franchise, and for the manager, there's never a doubt that the effort is as good as it could be. And I think that's a tribute to him. Because you can tell when a team is trying to get a manager fired. You can tell. They kind of look the other way, and they're not as fine-tuned, and they're not as precise. They're trying to get this guy out of here, and they always do. I have not seen it for a day here, and we got a pretty good run going right now. He's been here for quite a while. I think he's done a terrific job. And when you have all those different players coming in, changes the whole dynamic. And a lot of these guys he had never seen before. Think about that. It's like the job Mattingly did a year ago in Florida. He had like 30 guys he'd never met before because of the pandemic, and guys sitting on the side. So it's hard. It's hard to manage. You can always question, they should have hit and run. They play small ball, do this. Why they hit this guy here? Why they do that? And there's a million reasons for it all, and it's part of the gig. But overall, again, it's like I would always ask myself, do I trust the player? I'd also ask myself, do I trust the manager? Do I trust the staff? I trust this crew implicitly.
Yeah, and Ned, and you said this on our show often, because you've forgotten more baseball than 99% of the world, and you've often said this. Look, I can only say what I think they should do, but I'm not in that clubhouse. I'm not in there internally what their conversations are. And I've said this before: is that sometimes we don't always understand why a move is made. Only they do internally.
Yes.
And they won't always, and they don't have the obligation to explain it to everybody at a press conference either.
Exactly. And there's so many things that happen. There's probably a dozen things a day that we watch and we see, and we watch every game and every pitch, but we still don't know because we're not in the room. We're not privy to the conversations. We're not privy to the strategy. Think about a couple years ago in the full season. Not one Dodger threw 200 innings. Usually you're trying to get, your horses, so to speak, to go 200, 210 innings. No, they managed everybody in a different way. People go, wow, how come this guy's only throwing 5 today? You know why? Because they're going to save that 6th inning or that 6th and the 7th inning for the 15th of October. Right. So that he's not only healthy, whoever it is, they're not only healthy, but they still got more in the tank than the competition they're playing. It's 9 against 9, but a lot of it is one-on-one. A lot of it is pitcher versus hitter. That's how every play starts. It starts one versus one. And so you've got to figure out, okay, how do we match up 1 versus 1 where we've got the better talent, we've got the more endurance, and we've got the better talent through a trying season where everybody gets mentally and physically tired. Keeping guys fresh is a huge part of all of this. They've done a terrific job with it. And they've got the finances to do it, and they've got the farm system to do it, and they've got the major league players to do it. And they use it well. They do not ever, they use it as well as any organization I've ever seen. And that's not a company line. That's just what I see.
Ned, before we let you go, Rodney and David Vassay talked about this earlier in the week. I want to get your take as a guy that was the general manager of multiple clubs. Corey Seager. All right, a guy like Corey Seager, if you're the GM, would you go to him early and say, you're going to be up, let's try to get something long-term extended. I know his agent's got to work on it. And B, or agree to it. And B, is there a price point you look at and you go, that's too much? You're the general manager. How would you handle a situation like Corey Seager who's coming up?
Well, I think, and again, I don't know the conversations. Okay, I know the principles pretty well. I think that if you're going to be into your free agent year, you're going to play it out. I don't think there's any way to get somebody, unless the player himself is going to say, hey, I don't want to do anything else. I just want whatever you give me, I'll take type of thing, which is 1 in 100. So I think you play this one out. I think that's the way it goes, and you deal with it. Both sides deal with whatever happens, and wherever the market goes for on both sides of it. Once you get into it, and Scott is, he signed some guys before they were free agents, but it's rare, and I sense that. It's got to be a player demand that says, I don't want to go to free agency. I'm cool here, and I don't ever want to leave type of thing. Doesn't mean that Seager wants to leave. It just means that, he's kind of doing what almost everybody does in that case. The other part of your question is a great question. And in the negotiations, I've probably done $2 billion worth of deals. Some good, some not so good. I could give you the list of not so good in a heartbeat. A lot of those guys. But I think what I would do is I would canvas everybody, get thought process. My inner circle, manager, certainly your training staff and your doctors, where somebody's at in their career, what do they think? And take that all in, and certainly have conversations with the ownership. But I would set a number in my mind, both a term and a total number value. And I would know that, okay, that's what I would like to do, and I probably added a percentage or a few percentages to what I would really like to do, knowing it's usually above what the general manager is going to be comfortable with doing. And I would go into it knowing that I probably still had to go higher. But I also knew where I wouldn't go. I also knew the term, I'm not going 5 years with this guy. I'm not going 20 million, 10 million, 5, whatever it would be. I'm not doing it. So if it gets to this point, I'm out. And it's incumbent upon, I think, both sides, if the player wants to be there, if the team is not just being used, and this conversation is just in a general way right now. Teams are always used as a stocking horse for somebody else to pay more. If that's not the case, and if the player really has an affinity for a market, for a franchise, for a fan base, I always would tell the agents, it's incumbent upon both of us to figure this thing out. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's incumbent upon both of us to make the best effort we can. We want the player wants to be here. Doesn't mean we crazily overpay. It does mean that, our effort is pure, your effort is pure, and let's see what we can do. And if we can't do it, we can't do it. And I was always candid right out of the gate. If they'd say, well, we're looking for $6 and $200 million over 7 years, and I had no interest in that, I'd say, you know what, I'm going to go elsewhere right now. You got to, if you change your mind, you come back to me, but know that I'm going to go shop someplace else. I don't see the 7. I don't see the 200. You can give me some reasons, this and that, but I've also scoured it. I've also dug deep in it. I've had my analytics people dig deep into it, my medical people. I just don't see it. And then we would go from there. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they leave. But I think you have to have that in the mind. You cannot have no ceiling. You have to have a ceiling that may move a little bit, and obviously it's going to move up before it's going to go down. But I think you kind of just have to know what you're doing and do it in a quiet moment. When I decided what I was going to do, that was after counsel from a bunch of people. But they weren't in the room when I decided what to do. That was up to me. I sat in the chair. It was up to me to decide how many years, what I was going to do, get ownership's blessing or not, and figure out something else if the blessing wasn't there. But you've got to know. In that seat, you've got to know. Same with trades. You take all the information you can. At the end of the day, you sit in the room by yourself, quiet moment, and you figure out what I'm going to do. Most of the time, it's clear cut, yeah, A or B.
You know what? Time's short. I got to follow up, though, because this was fascinating. Give us one you walked away from. Give us one you said, we can't go.
Oh, goodness, there were probably many of them. Prince Fielder, I called Scott. James Loney had a rough year, and it was right at the ownership juncture when the McCourts were leaving and Guggenheim was coming in. And Frank gave me the okay to go a certain distance, which I was comfortable with. And I mentioned to Scott, I said, look, I don't want this in the press. I don't want anybody knowing about this. It's a quiet thing. We're in a sale mode of a franchise. I flew to Dallas. I met with Prince for a few hours with Mike Fiore, Scott's right-hand guy, and Scott, and I brought 2 of my scouts in. One of them had known Prince for a long time. Established a little bit of a comfort level there. Tony Howell and Vance Lovelace, my right-hand guy. And we went and we met for a whole day. And as we were getting close to doing a deal, Detroit stepped in, and Scott, to his credit, called me and said, hey, Detroit just lost Martinez. The owners called me. They're willing to do what I've been asking you to do. And, so if you want him, he loves L.A., and he loved Tony Gwynn Jr., who was still part of our organization. And, this could happen. I said, I'm not doing it. I can't do it. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to that duration. I'm not going to that dollar figure. Thank you for your honesty, and thank you, and best of luck to Prince. Enjoy being with him. So that's one. There's a bunch of other. I mean, I had a trade for CC Sabathia years ago too. That was a different dynamic. But I had a trade in 08 that I thought could really change our franchise at the deadline. CC and Casey Blake and Jamie Carroll for 5 prospects, of which one of them ended up being a big league player in Santana. The other 4, were rated high in all the little national magazines and stuff like that, but I didn't believe that they could play in this market. You got to know your market, too. This is a great market. It's a big market. It's got big expectations. Even though people from the outside say it's laid back and this and that, it's not going to be New York or Philly or Boston where they're going to, pay a bunch of money to come and boo you. But if you're not playing well, they'll be at the beach, they'll be at Disneyland, they'll be hanging at Fred's house. They'll be, they won't be coming to the stadium.
That was just fascinating.
Yeah,
Wow.
fireside chats with Ned Coletti.
We could do it. We could do it from midnight to 4, so I could tell some of those stories too that you like.
Oh
those
yeah,
are the best.
those insomniacs out there. Let's do it.
All right, we'll see what happens this weekend. We'll have you back next week as always, and then.
All right.
But then next week, I want you to talk a little more about the ones you walked away with. All
right, I'll give that some more thought.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot of them. There's a bunch that didn't work, and some you signed, and you knew when you signed it. It was not going to be a good deal, but you had no choice. Only so many Major League Baseball players.
All right, Ned, have a good weekend. We'll talk next week.
All right, guys, be well. Thank you for the time.
Is it just me, or is that fascinating?
Always, yeah, always. Just the story, and it's not just the story; it's the way he tells it from his perspective and in his voice. It's great.
Yeah, and he takes you inside. He's taking you places you don't go, you don't know, you have no access to.
Right.
Well, he is the best. Okay. Well, next hour we'll have some spirituality.
Oh.
And now another Rogan and Rodney.
Oh, yeah!
Afternoon Delight.
Look, big mansion, big limits, big standards, big vision. No distractions, big difference. They living, I live lavish. I can't with love, cause it happens. What could you prove to me?
Today's Afternoon Delight is Single and Happy by Cash Doll. This song was released late last week and comes on the heels of her Juicy J assisted track entitled Like a Pro that dropped a couple weeks ago. The 29-year-old Detroit native recruited R&B singer Eric Bellinger and rapper Wale to be featured artists on this track, which will likely appear on her yet-to-be-titled upcoming sophomore album, which many believe could be released before the end of the year. Again, today's Afternoon Delight is Single and Happy by Cash Doll.
All right. And now, from the court to the courtroom with Jacob Emrani.
Okay, before we hit Labor Day weekend, bring out our good buddy Jacob Emrani. Jacob, how are you today?
Hey, Fred. Hey, Rodney.
Hey, all right, Jacob, of course, a proud partner of the Los Angeles Lakers. And it looks like they might be in the market to shop for a center if they cannot get things worked out with Marc Gasol. Do you have any update on that? Do we know if they're going to re-sign him or if Gasol's going to opt in?
Yeah, I think the way it's looking is that the whole Gasol thing is probably, basically ran its course. Obviously, Gasol does have choices to be, somewhere in Europe and probably get paid well for it. At this particular moment, I think it becomes more in terms of if the Lakers are going to be able to make him feel welcome. But between you and I don't really even think, the Lakers are seeing him as part of, as part of their future plans. I feel like they're trying to bring in some new people, and I feel like, they have a plan of where they're going. The same way, they brought on Rondo. As you know, they were working out a couple of people, and they were very close to bringing back Isaiah Thomas. But then suddenly, the Rondo situation ended up presenting itself, and it was a no-brainer. And for all the people, who were unhappy that Dudley left, it was really sort of a, Rondo or Dudley kind of situation. So, Rondo ended up falling into their lap. No, not really more as a player, but I think more as a locker room guy and a film room guy and somebody who can really bring everybody together.
Yeah, I agree with that. Everybody bashing that his role is just as important off the court as it is on the court. So I think it was an important move. Jacob, we all know you're a partner with the Lakers, big Laker fan, but you're also a big Dodger fan. We got the big Dodger Giants rivalry game series this weekend. What's your thoughts on that and how the Dodgers are now playing with a little bit momentum?
Oh, are you kidding me? I'm loving it. I mean, I can't, just in the past few weeks, all I heard everybody saying is that the Dodgers are not going to be able to catch the Giants, and 2.5 games was too many. But obviously, we know this is sports, and we know that as long as you put your head down and you do your thing, things will play itself out. So obviously, the Dodgers have a great opportunity, in this series to not only show us that they should be in first place, but make sure that they are in first place by, gaining a 3-game advantage. Now, we both know that, when they play against each other, it's a double whammy either way you go. So, ultimately at the end of the day, I think, the Dodgers are going to show, where they are. They've got a nice momentum going, and they just have to be able to focus and play with that sense of urgency that unfortunately some days they have not been playing with.
Jacob, I know that this is a very busy time of year for your office, Labor Day weekend. Everybody trying to squeeze in that last little bit of summer, and that leads to accidents, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Labor Day is one of the, highest travel days, lots of accidents. And, I want to tell our listeners something more than just if you're in an accident. I think a lot of times when you get into an accident on a 3-day weekend, you really can't get to anybody, right? All the phone calls you make to your doctors, to your attorneys, to whoever, everybody's off. They're all enjoying their 3-day weekend. Number one, one of the rules in my office is we don't ever have long weekends. We don't even have weekends. We're on, 24 hours, 7 days a week, so that people who are in an accident can reach us at any point. But Fred, one of the bigger problem on these weekends is if people are injured, they can't get to a doctor, and they wait. People wait until Tuesday, Wednesday, until everyone comes back. And I want to urge them to definitely get to the emergency room or get to an urgent care and make sure to get yourself looked at. Unfortunately, I'm in the hospital for the past 8 days because my dad has been here, and I've been sleeping here with him. And I can tell you I've had a, front seat view as to how important it is for you to be very firm as to what occurs with the medical providers. And what I mean by that is that often when you go to a healthcare provider or if you go to the hospital, a lot of times people fill out the questionnaire and they leave a bunch of things empty. And they don't know that the moment that gets, put into the system, everything that you left empty, they're going to say you're not experiencing. So, if you're injured and you go in there and you say my back hurts, even if your leg hurts, if you don't actually make sure to put your leg hurts, the computer is going to say your leg doesn't hurt. And I just want to encourage, our listeners that when you do go to the doctors, whether it's for an accident or any other reason, you need to make sure to fill everything in. Make sure to tell them everything that hurts, because these computer programs now are a default. For whatever you don't say, they go ahead and fill out the opposite, and that can, come back to hurt you. So I've had a front seat view here for the past 8 days at the hospital, making sure that, I'm an advocate for my dad for everything that's going on. But a lot of people don't have an advocate that understands it, and their family themselves, their family members are in the hospital, and they don't know that this has to be done. So I really felt like I should share that, before this long weekend, make sure that everybody knows that you got to pay attention to these things because other people are not necessarily looking out for your best.
Jacob, how is your dad?
Thank God, he's improving. Unfortunately, he had a fall about 2 months ago, and he didn't really think much of it. And, in the past, 10 days, he had not really had his balance. And, we took him to the doctor, and they had found, some bleeding in his head, so they had to do surgery. But, again, that tells us how, how really precious life is and how the little things can really, change the course of your life. But, I'm thankful and blessed and, here with him every day and, helping him, improve. And, I thank all the healthcare providers who help as well. But, we all go through this. I'm sure, Fred, you know it. Rodney knows it. Our listeners know it. All we can do is be there for our family members and be an advocate. I mean, the word advocate is not just a light word. We really need to be an advocate for our family members and, for everybody that we can help.
All right. Well, our thoughts, our prayers are with you, Jacob. Fingers crossed your dad gets better. You have a terrific weekend, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you, guys. God bless you all. Have a great weekend.